Welcome to StopFake, the place where we identify fakes and debunk them to set the record straight on disinformation about Ukraine. I'm Marko Suprun, and our stories this week are: a UN draft resolution on human rights violations on the Crimea peninsula is filled with lies, freezing Ukrainians riot because of a lack of heat, and the 7 commandments of fake news. So let's get to it. Since Russia annexed the Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea in 2014, Russian media have been busy constructing their narrative about the happy haven that they claim Crimea is today. But this narrative was rattled by a recent draft resolution condemning human rights violations in Crimea, approved by the Third Committee of the United Nations General Assembly. Komsomolskaya Pravda, RT, the monarchist Orthodox site Tsargrad, and others complained that by passing the resolution, the UN demonstrated it was blind and being led by Kyiv, and declared there were absolutely no human rights violations in Crimea, and that fewer countries were supporting such resolutions and instead were throwing their support behind Russia. Now, on November 15th, the UN General Assembly Third Committee, overseeing social, humanitarian, and cultural issues, passed a draft resolution on human rights in Crimea. Such UN resolutions have been passed every year since Russia annexed Crimea, with new information added annually. This year, the Ukrainian delegation pushed for every political prisoner in Crimea to be named. According to the Ukrainian Deputy Foreign Minister Serhiy Kyslytsya, the resolution also calls on Russia to provide Ukrainian consular officials, the Red Cross, and the European Committee for the Prevention of Torture access to Ukrainian political prisoners held by Russia, as well as information about their health and the conditions under which they are being incarcerated. Since Russia annexed Crimea, Moscow has denied that any repressions against Ukrainians or Crimean Tatars have taken place. According to the Crimean Human Rights Group, since 2014, Russia's security service, the FSB, has arrested some 50 Ukrainian citizens, 29 of whom are Crimean Tatars. All of them are accused of sabotage, espionage, or extremism. Pro-Ukrainian activists are subjected to regular searches, and only in November 2018, the FSB conducted 4 inspection raids, and in one case, 30 Crimean addresses were searched. Ukraina.ru and scores of other Russian media reported that Ukrainians were rioting throughout the country because they had no heat or hot water in their homes. People are in despair. This is a social tragedy. Murder by cold has come to Ukraine, declared Komsomolskaya Pravda. The presenters of the 60 Minutes program on Russia's state television channel Rossiya 1 announced, quote, "Ukraine is on the verge of social turmoil. The Cold War the government has been waging against its population has brought thousands of people onto the streets. The outside temperature is -5 Celsius. People are freezing. The radiators are ice cold, and the president is frightened of a possible coup." Now, several Ukrainian cities did in fact turn the heat on somewhat later than scheduled, but certainly the country was not freezing to death, as Russian media hysterically claimed. One city with heating issues is Smila in Cherkasy province, south of the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, with a population of 80,000. But even here, as of November 17th, the entire city had heat. The city government is being held responsible for the late start in heating homes. Ukraine's government has launched a criminal investigation into the incompetence of the local authorities, and the national parliament has proposed that the city hold special elections to remove the current local government from power. Ukraine's central gas provider, Naftogaz Ukraina, warned that heat supply might be delayed in 5 Ukrainian cities as local utilities had run up considerable debts and were not adhering to their repayment schedules. According to a cabinet minister's order, until those debts are paid, Naftogaz cannot provide utility companies with gas at a discounted rate. According to Naftogaz Deputy Chairman Serhiy Pereloma, most local utilities pay their bills in a timely manner and are prepared for the cold winter months. But every year, some irresponsible mayors realize it's time to turn the heat on only when people start complaining and demonstrating by their offices. A recent 3-part series multimedia project by the New York Times reveals how current Kremlin disinformation campaigns have their roots in Russia's long tradition of weaponizing information. Titled Operation Infection, the series tells the story of a political virus invented decades ago by the KGB to slowly and methodically destroy its enemies from the inside, and which the Kremlin continues to deliberately spread to this day. We encourage you to go to the New York Times website and watch the entire series. But right now, let's get to the 7 commandments of fake news, a step-by-step guide from the Kremlin's fake news book on how to turn the most outrageous lie into a successful news story. The first commandment is to look for cracks and target societies. The second commandment says to create a big lie, a lie so outrageous no one will believe it is made up. The third commandment, wrap that lie around a grain of truth. Disinformation works best when it has a tiny bit of truth in it, while the fourth commandment orders you to conceal your hand. Make it seem that the story came from somewhere else. The fifth commandment is to find yourself a useful idiot, someone who would unwittingly push your message to wider audiences, like Steven Seagal or Stephen Cohen. The sixth commandment, when truth is uncovered, deny everything. And finally, the seventh commandment, play the long game. Efforts might not bear fruit for years, but accumulated over a longer period of time, they will eventually have a political impact. Finding and exploiting differences within pluralistic societies, carefully calibrating disinformation messages to target audiences, wrapping false statements around that kernel of truth, and amplifying narratives both through willing and unsuspecting voices, these are the core features of Kremlin's disinformation campaigns. In many ways, the Kremlin's methods are old, but the tools are new. The Soviet KGB had to rely on obscure newspapers, while today the Kremlin has a media empire and the internet at its disposal, relentlessly pursuing the strategy of divide and rule, to break alliances, turn individuals and social groups and countries against one another, and especially the rational center, and weaken the West. That's it for this week. You can find more dissected disinformation on our website at StopFake.org. Look, be vigilant, and don't consume fakes. If you spot any disinformation about Ukraine, send it to us for a truth autopsy. I'm Marko Suprun, and this is StopFake. Thanks for watching.